Stocks closed out the week in a mixed session. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq posted modest gains while the Dow fell. However, the S&P 500 and Dow each posted weekly advances for a third straight week, while the Nasdaq declined by about 1% over last week. In fact, the Nasdaq had its worst weekly performance relative to the S&P 500 since 2009. The weekly performances came after new data showed a greater than expected number of new jobless claims. Other economic data on Friday showed an ongoing improvement in the housing market, with both building permits and housing starts rising in June over May. However, another Friday report showed an unexpected drop in consumer sentiment in the first part of July, as coronavirus makes a resurgence in some parts of the country. But as we touched on recently, the rotation out of tech stocks and other high growth shares that had led the market's rally from March lows is still underway. Hard hit was Netflix, which saw its stock dive after delivering a weak outlook. But today we will look at a chart which should have traders on the edge of their seats. But since I'm not a trader, rather an investor and a contrarian, I'm not too concerned. I'm just looking for another opportunity, one which will come sooner or later. So, let's take a look at the charts. And today we're going to look at two charts, beginning here with the 6-month daily on the spiders, the SPY, and the close on Friday was 321.72. And I've drawn these channel lines here, the lower level here and the upper level here, to show you that the SPY has been trading within this channel for the last several months or so, with the exception of this island here. And I call that an island simply because there's a gap at this point on the way up and then a gap on the way down. So other than that, the stock or the indice has been moving within this channel line. So the traders are on edge because they're waiting for this to either break below or break above. Before it breaks above this channel line, it needs to break above that previous high, which has been bouncing up against for the last few days or so. And I think that that will probably occur, but I don't think that we're necessarily going to get above that upper channel line simply because I think things are starting to erode. But let's go ahead and look here. You can see volume looks fine, and you can see that the MAC has been going sideways for the last, say, 3 months or so, and that often happens when we have a melt up. We've talked about a melt up a number of times, and most recently at the end of last year into the early part of 2020, and that did not end well. So basically, the melt up occurs when the MAC heads sideways, more or less, and it's intertwined very close. The slow line is very close to the fast line, and they intertwine on their sideways move. But because they're above zero, then the indice or the stock moves upward. You can see here in the histogram the sideways movement as well, and you see that in these other oscillators such as the price rate of change. The relative strength has a little bit of volatility here with that high there coming on down, but been sideways for the most part through this time frame here. Now, of course, the stochastic has been going up and down, as well as the Williams, but I think they're starting to show signs of eroding, and I think the topping process is occurring. One last look at the channel and the SPY, and now let's go to the weekly chart. And now we're looking at the 3-year weekly chart on the spiders. And as you can see here, there was a pretty good melt up at this point on the way up there, as you can see, from late 2019 into early 2020. And we broke at that point and then headed down below the lower level of that channel. We also had a channel basically moving on up here, and that broke not as significantly, but it still broke. And this one here also broke and headed on down. And that was relatively serious at the end of 2018, if you remember. And we had another channel moving on up through here, and then that broke there in late 2017, early 2018. So We've had a very nice move from that bottom there, and this channel is heading on up like that, and so I'm simply waiting for that to break. Now, the price chart isn't necessarily going to tell you when it's going to break, but we come down here and we'll get somewhat of an idea. Looking at the volume has been heading on down pretty much, except for this few weeks there, and then heading on down again. So relatively weak volume in the recent periods. Back into the MAC, we can see the melt up there, and this melt up here, and this melt up at that point, and we're just seeing another melt up at that point there. It's got a pretty good separation between the fast and slow lines, so it's not quite ready. But I think you take a look at the histogram and you can see the topping process more or less in that area. It's a little choppy in here, but I don't think it has enough momentum strength to continue higher. So I think things are going to erode, but it could last for a while. Here into the price rate of change, we talked about this level before. This is relatively high, and you can go back 7, 10 years and not see another measurement that high on the price rate of change. So stock market gravity is going to take hold and pull it down into the relative strength index. We've talked about this a couple of times where you've had that high there and then that high there and then the break. So we have another high at that point, and this one is not as high, and you have a downward trend, which to me is indicating a break sooner or later, just like this one did here. Moving here into the stochastics, the fast line is more narrow. It's closer to the slow line. We're into that overbought territory. So now I'm just waiting for this to start curving over, and then we'll have an idea perhaps better on when it breaks. If it does, I think that's what the probability is, but there's no guarantee. And here into Williams. Williams looks fine. It did head back up here to the upper levels of that overbought territory, and it's remained up here for a couple of months. But sooner or later, it's going to head down, and we'll watch and see if it breaks below that 20 level. That's going to be another indication, perhaps, that things are eroding. Back up here, one last look at the price chart. And right now, again, to me, the probabilities are greater that we're having a topping process. So be careful and be cautious. And for today, that's ChewDog Charts. Thank you.